Alright, welcome to another Guitar Tips video. If you are tuning in from the chord voicings number 2 video, because I started talking about major scales and said that I'm going to make a major scales video, here it is. And we'll talk a little bit about major scales and not get too in depth. The major scale is a beautiful like codification of musical knowledge, really, and it really you can explain a lot of music's by having a deep understanding of the major scale. And so let's get a basic understanding of the major scale first before we can dive deep into it. And it really is a beautiful thing once it starts unlocking a lot of the mysterious parts of music when you really do dive deep into the major scale. So let's get a little bit into it. The major scale, we'll do it in a couple positions. I'll do it here in a few C positions, or I'll do it all in the key of C, but a few different positions. So if we're in the open position right here, like third position, or I guess it's first position rather, we're going to play it and utilizing some open strings in it. So with the major scale, it sounds like this. Very elementary sounding, very basic sounding, and a lot of people don't like practicing their major scale because it doesn't sound cool. It doesn't have a lot of flair, especially if you're practicing it in the way I just played it, which is kind of just real straight and dry. That's really just to get an understanding of the note placement. What you do with the notes is up to you. So if you sound boring playing the major scale, it's because your playing is boring. And so you want to do something about your playing. It's not the scale's fault. It's it's the operator's fault. And so if you don't sound hip, if you don't sound cool, you want to start learning how to manipulate the major scale to get those cool tones and those inflections and nuances that you're looking for. But at first, when you're just practicing, just getting your finger positions, playing it nice and dry without any flair, without any flavor, is a good way to do it. Unless you're practicing improvising. Obviously, if you're practicing improvising with it, you want to put your own style to it. So, major scale, we call these scale degrees, or we have a term called scale degrees that we use to delineate the notes of the scale. So we have 8 or 7 different notes, but they go up to 8 before they repeat. And so we have note 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 8 would be a repeat of the first note, and we call that the octave. It's the 8th note. That's an easy way to remember it, and it has a special name because it starts to repeat the same thing that we just did, but at a higher pitch or a lower pitch. In this case, it's a higher pitch because we're going up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is also 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If we wanted to continue, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If we wanted to keep going all the way up as high as we can. Now, anything past 8 we call extensions, and I'll do a video on explaining extensions more in depth as well. But anything past 8 we call extensions, and that's when we can start adding tones like ninths and 13ths and different colors to the chords. In the last video talking about chord voicings, we added the second. A lot of times you'll hear this called as an add 9 chord. And you're like, well, add 9, what's a 9? I thought you said you're adding the second. I am adding the second, but it's an extended version of the second note, because this is a note D, which is the extension of D, which is in the open string in this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And this is instead of just a major chord, which is 1, 3, 5, 8, 10, if you want to call it like that in extended versions. I replaced 8 with 9, just like you could place 1 and 2. 8, 9, 1, 2, or 1, 2 with the open string. So this is why, if some of you guys might know this as an add 9 chord or an add 9 voicing, a C add 9 in this case. And that's why it's called an add 9. It's because we're adding the 9th. And so a lot of these voicings are really explanatory in their names. So like this one being called the add 9 voicing, we just have that 9th in there. Same thing with the other voicing we talked about, which was the 7th. We're adding the 7th, and we typically call that a major 7 because it is the root chord of a major scale with the 7th. So we have the root chord, which is the root triad rather, 1, 3, 5, and then we add add the seventh, so we tend to call that a major 7 chord. And that's a tension that we add to chords a lot these days. You hear it in jazz, actually everything: jazz, classical music, R&B, pop, soul, even some disco stuff. You know, like it's all over the place. It's common chord. So when you hear like, oh, I don't know my 7th chords, or I don't know this add 9 chord, it's like, I'm not a jazz player. It has really nothing to do with jazz specifically. It's just a organization of notes. How it's being used in the context of the music determines whether it's country or jazz or pop or blues or classical. But the organization of the notes are really just, it's fairly objective name, to be honest. We try to be objective with our naming so that they can be transferable between different types of music. And so this is just a major 7 chord. It's not a jazz chord. It's used in jazz. It's not a jazz chord. It's just a chord. And so that's a major 7. Now, if we wanted to do this scale shape in a different position, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Some people know this major scale position. You can continue to the 2nd octave if you want to. But we only need really this octave because we're going to do this major 7, which goes 1, 5, 7, 3 instead of 1, 3, 5, 7. Same 4 notes, 1, 3, 5, and 7 of the scale. Note 1, note 3, note 5, note 7. But we're doing this 3 up here for the chord voicing. And so this creates a slightly different sounding version of a major 7. Still a major 7 chord. Major 7, major 7. But the notes are organized in a different way. And knowing the major scale really helps you start laying out a grid on the neck so you can understand where these notes are and how they relate to each other. And the better understanding you have of how they relate to each other, then you can start building chord voicings and seeing these shapes move fluidly from one to the next. And I talk about this a little bit in the intro to inversions. All this is an inversion. An inversion of a chord is taking the same notes that creates that chord. So like a major 7 has to have 1, 3, 5, and 7. Taking those notes and reorganizing them in some fashion. So you could go 1, 3, 5, 7. You can go 1, 5, 7, 3. You can go 5, 1, 3, 7. You can go all different combinations of stacking them vertically, and we call those voicings. And different voicings we tend to call inversions because they're inversions of the same thing. Taking the same notes and flipping them around in different spots. And I talk about it doing some of these. These are all C major 7 chords. All of those are examples of C major 7, and they all have kind of a different vibe, and they all have different stackings of notes. They all have different voicings like we were talking about, and different feelings because of that, because we're changing what note is in our top upper melody. And I'll talk about chord voicings a lot if I do a chord melody video, like an intro to chord melody or an advanced chord melody. Understanding your voicings allows you to harmonize melodies very easily, just like a piano player would. Piano players are fantastic at this. They harmonize melodies with, at the drop of the hat. And guitar players, we tend to struggle a lot with that because we don't know our voicings. So you need to know your voicings, and in order to know your voicings, you need to know your major scale, so you know where just all these notes are laid out. The piano kind of is laid out in a very logical way. The guitar isn't. So we have to infuse some logic into the guitar so that we can make it simpler for our brain to be creative with the materials that we have. And the way you do that, in my opinion, is really, really knowing your major scale. And so I'll do another major scale video. I'll probably a ton of different ones, honestly. I'll probably do a bunch of major scale videos because it's so important. But sorry for this one being a little bit longer than usual. I did a little bit more talking and less playing and demoing. But really get into that major scale and start understanding how the neck is laid out. Very, very, very beautiful thing to do. And once again, thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next Guitar Tips video. Have a wonderful day, y'all.